Hey, AFI Film Festival! What's up? It's the Culture Detective here investigating your favorite movies. And this morning, I got 4 tickets to 4 films at the AFI Film Festival, and I am incredibly excited to non-stop watching films continuously. But anyways, I'm going to be doing a movie review on a film I watched twice. And this film is Resurrection, or in Mandarin Chinese, 狂野时代 by Chinese filmmaker Bi Gan. Now, this is very interesting. I usually don't do this. I usually just watch a film and then I review it. I usually don't wait until a second time before I review it. But this movie is so freaking dense and overwhelming and confusing that every single person I know who's seen this film once never gets it. And in fact, I'm the only person I know who has seen this film twice, so everyone I know who's seen this film is confused, dumbfounded, awestruck, and just smacked in the face. Now, if you didn't know this, Bi Gan is one of the most interesting filmmakers working right now. About 10 years ago, he released the film Kylie Blues, his first film, and it is such an interesting film that is basically Stalker, because it is adapted from the same novel that Stalker is adapted from, Roadside Picnic. In fact, the Chinese name is literally Roadside Picnic. But Kylie Blues is actually a water test for his next film released in 2018, Long Day's Journey into Night, which I watched before I went to Cannes Film Festival. What a freaking banger. This is a nocturnal neo-noir film that basically has the same structure as Kylie Blues. The first half is really choppy and fragmented and nothing makes sense. The second half is one long take. One actual, real, continuous long take, no cuts, and it is magical realist. It's supernatural, but only slightly, and it ties everything back together, and suddenly, instead of feeling jumbled and messy, it feels like a really poetic and just unorthodox way of interweaving love, time, memory, history. So Bi Gan is someone who has a unique voice, and before Cannes Film Festival, I was extremely excited for this film. It premiered in Cannes Film Festival, and on May 22nd, I was there in the world premiere of Resurrection. I was there. I lined up for 7 hours just to watch this film. And I fell asleep. I didn't fall asleep throughout the entire film, but I fell asleep through chunks of it, especially in the first half. And I was really mad at myself. But then again, I'm not going to blame myself. I was exhausted. I was tired. By the second week of Cannes, I basically fell asleep in almost every single film. And the people around me were also falling asleep. It's really difficult to not fall asleep in Cannes. Not because the films are bad, but because you're just so fucking tired. So Resurrection, I slept through parts of it, and because of that, I feel like I wasn't able to enjoy the film fully. Second of all, I was so confused, because I was completely awake in the first segment, and then in the long take in the last segment, and I still have zero idea what's going on. And going into a Bi Gan film, I had a certain expectation. I was thinking that it's going to be some kind of interesting slow cinema. I was thinking it's going to be some kind of Lynch-Tarkovsky mixture. This is not that at all. I had no idea what the fuck I just watched. The next morning, I literally read through all the Resurrection reviews on LA Times, New York Times, IndieWire, and not a single film critic knows what the fuck just happened in the movie. No one knows. Literally, all the film critics have no idea. All the film fans and cinephiles have no idea. No one knows what's going on in Resurrection. It's a clusterfuck, but in a good way. So obviously, I really wanted to rewatch it. So on May 24th, the last day of the festival, I actually tried to rewatch it because they do these reruns. And by the time I rushed to the theater, which is Salle Buñuel, the doors were closed and I couldn't rewatch it. So I had to wait for my next possible chance to rewatch Resurrection. I will be there first thing. And guess what? Aero Theater at Beyond Fest, Los Angeles, just a few days ago, they premiered Resurrection. And so I went, and I feel like that night, I am one of the few people who has seen Resurrection both in its world premiere and its North American premiere. I am a mad lad. And I find it really interesting because my impression of Resurrection is more or less the same, even though I was completely awake throughout my second watch of Resurrection. I was awake in every single second. I was literally looking at the screen, every single corner. I even picked up Easter eggs. My impression of the film is pretty much the same. It is a huge mess in a beautiful way. It is very confusing, and this time around, I accept that it is very confusing and messy, and all its beauty. The first time I watched the film, it made no sense to me, so I immediately tried to look for references. Oh, this is like Begon's Holy Motors, or this is like Inland Empire, because there are so many different parts of the story, and they're all not really connected, but it's all somehow interwoven. But I was just too afraid to admit that this is an anthology film. This is basically 5 or 6 short films, or 5.5, I guess. 5 short films packed into one film. This is an anthology film. Hate to admit this, but it's true. And, just because it's an anthology film doesn't mean it's bad. But when I watched Resurrection again, I thought of it more as Begon's Kinds of Kindness, except this is better than Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness because each segment is actually more interesting and more artistically interesting. But also I think the more appropriate comparison is Kurosawa's Dreams, except I haven't seen Dreams, so I feel like this is not a very good comparison. But anyways, the first 2 films in Begon's filmography, Kylie Blues and Long Days, are basically different versions of Stalker. This one is completely different because those 2 films are kind of a melding between reality and surrealism. It's about a village, it's about the life and the culture of that village and how that has magic in it, literally, seriously. But this Resurrection here is wall-to-wall artifice. There's no natural, organic, documentary flavored moments in it. It is all carefully staged and carefully crafted. If anything, Resurrection is actually more similar to Begon's earlier short film, A Short Story, which I also really love. But this film is essentially a museum with 5 art pieces. And while that doesn't seem as engaging, but it is 5 beautiful art pieces. And it's really funny because before I watched Resurrection, I read that the original premise is about Shu Qi, by the way, legendary actress. Shu Qi, her work with Hou Xiaoxian, amazing. Shu Qi as the lead actress, she got sick, she had a terminal illness, and she met a robot who can dream, a dreaming robot. And the dreaming robot basically took her from one dream to another dream to another dream, and she fell into something called the Eternal Time Zone. Well, guess what? That premise, thrown out the window. Doesn't matter anymore. Literally doesn't matter at all. This film's premise is completely changed. So again, 5 stories. Each story represents a sense, like sight, smell, sound, taste, touch. And also, each segment represents a part of Chinese film history. That's all you need to know. Now we enter part 1. When I watched Resurrection for the first time in Cannes, this is my favorite part because this is the part where I was the most awake for. And this part is an homage to silent film. It is in 4:3 aspect ratio and there's no dialogue. Also, by the way, in terms of aspect ratios, when I watched this film in Cannes, the aspect ratios are a mess because it's 4:3 like this. And then it goes to widescreen, but instead of like expanding it like this, it's small and it's contained within the 4:3. Or no, it's 4:3 and then the widescreen, but the widescreen was small because it was contained in a 16:9 ratio instead of a widescreen. So the screen felt really small. They fixed that in this new film, I think. Anyways, something wonky with the aspect ratio, they kind of fixed it. They also fixed the opening title cards. So instead of phantasmers, now the dreamers are called deliriants. But again, that is not related to the film at all. Don't even worry about it. So part one is silent film slash sight, because of course cinema is all about looking and observing and enjoying. And Bigan literally makes tons and tons of silent film references, from Nosferatu to Vampire to Metropolis to the Cabinets of Dr. Caligari, lots of German expressionism, we got some movie monsters. And this is easily the most artistically sophisticated part of the film, and there's something so beautiful and dense about every single frame that I really enjoy. And I also really like the way it switches gear into the second part, because it's just so much artistry. It just explodes on itself. It just implodes on itself, and now we're forced into the second part of the film. So part two, film noir. That is very apparent. That is very easy to spot. Part two is an homage to film noir, especially that of 1940s and 50s, but also 1930s, I guess, because this part, historically, literally a period piece, is set in the 1930s when China was attacked by Japan. And so this is very interesting, because not only is this part an homage to film history, but it is also a rendition of real history outside of film history. So this is a Sino-Japanese espionage film, a Chinese-Japanese spy thriller, like Lust Caution. And I just find it really interesting that Bigan would go for something like that. Bigan also makes a reference to Orson Welles' The Lady from Shanghai with the gunshots and the mirrors. I love that scene a lot. It is thrilling and weird, and it's slow, and then this scene happens and you're like, holy shit, what the fuck just happened? Looks really good, and yes, it's a bit of a jumbled mess, but I think that's just Bigan's style, and I really appreciate this segment. Following that, we have the third part, which is supernatural folklore cinema. It takes place in the 1960s, and it's about taste. So the previous one is about sound, and you get like the lead actor of the film, Jackson Yee, hilarious, is a singer, and in the film, in that segment, he sings, or he's supposed to have like a beautiful voice. It's also about composing music. There are air raids. It's a very sonic segment. Part 3 starts to get interesting because it's about taste, and obviously I'm not gonna lick the silver screen, but we still have a lot of sort of allusions to taste, because the main character of this segment has a toothache, and he has to lick a bitter stone and smash his teeth with that stone to get rid of that tooth. That's, I don't know why. But this is easily the most unambitious and incomplete segment. Also, this is the segment I slept through the most in Cannes. In Cannes, I barely remembered anything from this segment other than smashing the teeth, or like throwing a snowball, and like there's like writing words on like a well of like water, but I don't even remember it until I saw it again. But yeah, even though I do think this is the weakest part, it's really funny. And Bigan's uncle is in it again. Bigan's uncle is in every single film of his, and he's hilarious in all of them. He is amazing in all of them. I guess even though this is not as interesting of a segment, but it kind of reminds me of some like 60s, 70s Shaw Brothers kooky, spooky period film, so it kind of reminds you of The Magic Blade, which is just awesome. Okay, part 4 is narrative dramas, pretty straightforward. It takes place in the 1980s, and it's about smell. It tells a story of a con man who works with a child to trick a mob boss into thinking that the child has supernatural abilities, and the ability being able to smell the poker card and knowing what card it is. So she would smell, ace of spades, and of course that's just a trick. They're con men. It's the silliest, the stupidest segment, but there's something really charming about how silly it is. And the first time I watched the film, because I was half dreaming, I thought the kid has actual superpowers, and I was like, wow, this is like Renoir, but good. But no, it is a con. It is a con pulled off by Jackson Yee as a rough middle-aged guy and a child. And is surprisingly, it ends on a very heartfelt note, which I think is something that David Lynch does all the time, where he finds the most sympathetic moments in the most bizarre moments. But yeah. And then part 5, which is, of course, the long take, the Be Gone one take. Now we're here. And this takes place at the last night of 1999 on a village on the edge of the world, somewhere in Chongqing, where a man and a woman falls in love. They are strangers, they fall in love, but turns out the woman is owned by this evil mob boss, so the man has to rescue her from this mob boss. But of course, that entire sequence is violent and bloody, yet dreamy and surreal and bizarre, and just we're back in Begon's wheelhouse. I was completely awake when I saw this in Cannes. And I was actually quite disappointed at first, because Begon's long takes have always been ingenious. There have always been mantelpieces that basically tie everything together. So if you think the whole film is confusing, don't worry, the long take's going to solve all the problems. But the long take in this movie does not solve any problems at all. We have 2 completely new characters we haven't seen before, and the story is not related to anything else. And so instead of looking at this long take as sort of a mantelpiece, this is more of an emotional piece, a mood piece. Other Beacon long takes have been really impressive. 40-something minutes, 1 hour long. This is easily his shortest long take at 38 minutes long. It is not as technically impressive. The camera doesn't fly, it doesn't go into the water, there are no fire stunts, but this is emotionally very potent. I just love the idea of 2 strangers falling in love on the day where they think the world would end, because a lot of people thought 1999 would be the last year of the world, but of course that didn't happen. And it didn't happen in this film as well. There's a sunset, and they realize that they're still alive, and that moment is beautiful. I didn't cry. Begon in the Q&A said that he expected people to cry, but I think no one cried. And I think that's because these characters are not really fleshed out enough. We didn't spend enough time with these characters, so that moment wasn't as cathartic as he would have hoped it would be. But I do get it, though. I do get that it is emotional and beautiful, and I really appreciate it. So, yeah, and Wang Jue singing in Cantonese, wacky. So the conclusion of the film kind of comes back, Shu Qi returns, and we see a movie theater, and we see people wax figures looking like people walking in the theater and then melting. Really provocative. The first time I watched it, I was like, what the fuck? Now that I watched it, I noticed that the wax figures are basically the cast and maybe also the crew of all the previous segments. And you know what's so fucking beautiful about cinema? Is that you spend so much time making it, and then you watch it, and you're proud of it. And that's what that scene felt like. I felt proud with the actors, and I was moved. As someone who makes films, I was like, yeah, that's when it pays off. That's when all the hard work pays off. So yeah, overall, this is a tough film because there's no through line throughout the entire film. It is very jumbled, it is very messy, and this is definitely not a good first film to watch if you want to get into Begon. I don't think it is the strongest film. It didn't leave me with the strongest taste, but there's something so brazen and out there and ambitious and wacky about this film that just impressed me. Also, the composer is M83. Are you fucking kidding me? The score, I don't think it's that great, but it's M83. Like, what is going on? And yeah, please check this film out if you have time. I'm giving this one a strongly to a light 9 out of 10. So, have you watched Resurrection? Comments below, let me know. Subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching.